Hashem, today's daf yomi is Chun Samach Aleph, Chun 61, but we're going to start really the end of a sugya on Samach Hamabeis, where the Gemara is telling us different psukim, which we might have thought are not relevant, Chas v'shalom, but the Torah is telling us why they're relevant. So therefore, we're just going to start on the bottom of Samach Hamabeis, 5 lines, and then 5 lines from the, hold on one second, right. So, 5 lines from the bottom, the end of the word, with the pasuk of Tzidonim Yikra'u L'Charmon Siryon. It says in Parashas Devarim that the Tzidonim called for the Charmon the Siryon, and the Amori called it Sinir. And the Gemara says, well, why do we care? Why do we care what the Tzidonim, the people from Tyre, and the Amorayim, what do we care what they call the Charmon? So Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Tana, Sinir v'Siryon mehari Eretz Yisrael. The reason Sir and Siryon are mountains of the land of Israel, and since Hermon is close to the Tzidonim and to the land of the Amorites, the Tzidonim are Tyre, Phoenicians. So therefore, they built upon these two mountains large cities. And the Sidonim called their city Sirion, and the Moraim called their city Sinir. It's to teach us that each of the nations of the world went and built for themselves a large city in the land of Israel. And they wanted to call this city just like the cities of the land of Israel. To teach us that the mountains of the land of Israel are precious upon the Jews, are precious upon the non-Jews, the nations of the world. So therefore, telling us how much the land of Israel is admired by the nations of the world that they follow this. Kayotziba, we're on the bottom line or 2 lines on the bottom of Samacham base. Similarly, Vesa'am Avir Osole Arim says in Parashas Vayigash that Yosef and Paro moved the Egyptians from the land to the cities. So Ma'inav Kamina, why do we care what Pharaoh did to the Egyptians? This population transfer. So it was all done. So teach us the Lolikru Le'achav Galvasa, because Yosef didn't want the brothers to be called refugees. So people don't like it to be called by that name. So therefore, he moved it so that people wouldn't be called by that name. So he moved the Egyptians, so the Egyptians themselves will be refugees, so that nobody else will be called by that name. So now the Mishnah said that the signs of a bird, the kosher signs of a bird, are not listed in the Torah. The Torah lists 24 birds which are not kosher, but it doesn't list explicitly the signs of the bird that are not kosher. So the Gemara is going to take that up. But the Mishnah then said, the Torah doesn't list the signs, but the Mishnah then gave 4 signs of what's a kosher bird and what's not. The 4 signs are a non-kosher bird is dores. It claws the animals. Debate what it is. Rashi says different places, different things. But in our daf yesterday, it said the bird claws it and picks it up and puts it in its mouth. And then there are 3 positive signs of a kosher bird. 3 positive signs of kosher bird that we went over yesterday are that the bird has an extra finger, which is a question, what does that mean? Rashi says in the back of its foot, Ramban says in the front of its foot, and the bird has a zefek, a crop, and a korkavan, that is koleif, a peelable gizzard. So you had a question, Bill? No. Okay, so the Gemara says, you mean to say that the signs of a bird are not mentioned explicitly in the Torah? Are they not said? Vatanya. But we have a brisa. It says nesher. I'm just going to use the English translation that's commonly used today, but really we're not 100% sure. The nesher, there's a big dispute if a nesher is an eagle. That's how it's usually translated, or a vulture. But the brisa says ma nesher miuchad, just like the nesher is special. She'en lo etzba yisera. The Nesher, we're going to say, are the signs of a non-kosher bird not listed? But the Brisa says they are derived from the Torah. Just like an eagle or a Nesher is special. It doesn't have the extra finger. Vizefek. And it doesn't have the crop. You know what the crop is? The crop is the part where the food initially goes right below the neck, and the korkavan is where the food gets digested. So the crop stores the food. So just like a nasher does not have the extra finger, it doesn't have the zefek. V'ain korkavano niklav, and its korkavan, its gizzard is not peeled. V'dores ve'ochel, and it claws the food when it eats it. It claws it, picks it up and eats it. Tameh, it's not kosher. Av kol kayotzebo, so to any bird that has these four non-kosher non-kosher signs is tameh. So the Brisa says you need all four non-kosher signs. Torah and sheyeshan etzba yisera v'zefek v'korkavan niklaf ve'ein dorsim v'ochlin tahorin. Just like what's the Torah? That's the pigeon. Just like it has the extra finger, the zefek, the crop, the korkavan that's peeled. Ve'ein dorsim v'ochlin tahorin. Kol kayotzi ben torin. So anything that has all four signs is tahar. So we see from here that the signs are listed in the Torah. We'll see this later on. This is what this stuff is going to talk about. There's a fundamental dispute between Rashi and the Rambam. Do you need all four signs or one of the four signs? The Rashi says you need all four in order to be kosher, and Rambam says you need one. So Amar Abaye lo nemar pirusha midovrei Torah ela midivrei sofrim. So Abaye says the Mishnah is saying that the Torah is not explicit what the signs of a kosher bird are. That is only explicit from the rabbis. Yes.
So the Rambam that disputes
Says you need one sign. Yeah.
So
the Gemara says, what about the fact that there aren't all four of these signs? Tani Rabbi Chia, Of Hababa Siman Echad. Rabbi Chia taught a bird that comes with one sign is tahor. A bird that comes with one kosher sign is going to be tahor. Why? Because it is not similar to the nasher, which has all four signs. Nasher delay slay klal. Nasher has zero kosher signs. Hudu otechol. That you can't eat. Ha'ika the islu chad techol. But if there is a bird that has one of the kosher signs, you should be able to eat it. So the Gemara says, why does Rabbi Chia learn it out from the Nasher and not from the Torim? Why don't we learn just the opposite? Ma Torin dika kulu arba, just like the Torah, the dove, they have all four signs that are kosher. Why don't we say afachinami adika kulu arba? Means say the Gemara, Rabbi Chia is saying you only need one sign to be kosher. You need all four signs to be non-kosher. So the Gemara says, why don't we learn the opposite? Just like the dove has all four signs, why don't we say unless you have all four signs, you're not kosher? The Gemara says, no, imkain shar ofo satame dekasev rachman alamoi. If that would be the case, that if everything is learned out from the Torah, from this dove, then why do we need to list all the other non-kosher birds? Why don't we say that as long as you have one sign, you're kosher? And none of those birds have all four signs of being kosher. As we're going to see later on, the raven has two, or whatever we call the raven today, whatever they call the orave, the paras, the osmia, they have one sign, and the other birds have three signs. So from the fact that the Torah has to list all of the different types of birds, and they only have a portion of it, we see from here, we compare it to the Nasher and not to the Torim. So the Gemara says, and means say that you need all four signs in order to be kosher. Excuse me, that you need only one sign in order to be kosher, because we compare it to the Nasher and not to the Torah. Because from the fact that it lists the Nasher, which has all four signs, which has none of the four signs, we see from here if it has one of the signs, it's kosher. Where it says v'neilov minayu. Why don't we learn from those 24 birds? And just like there, if it has only three of the signs of being non-kosher, we don't eat it. I've called because most of those birds have three of the non-kosher signs. I've called so to any bird that has only three of the non-kosher signs, we shouldn't be eat. The kol shekain trei v'chad, and for sure, if it has two of the non-kosher signs or one of the non-kosher sign, we shouldn't be able to eat it. Gemara says no. Im kain orev tekasav rachmano amli. If that's the case, why does the Torah write about the orev? Orev is specifically listed, even though it has only two simanim. The Orb is usually translated as the raven. Raven appears in the Torah and in Tanakh prominently. It first appears with the Noah story. We know that the Orb is sent out from the ark, but he doesn't go far away from the ark. The Midrash says because the Orb was suspicious of Noah that he wanted his mate, which it sounds like crazy, but there's two things you have to remember: that the Orav mated for life, birds. That's one of the unusual qualities about their species, and also the Orav is considered to be like one of the smartest creatures in the world. Geniuses, they could pick locks. So the Orav also appears in Malachim as the bird that brings meat to Eliyahu Hanavi. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if we're going to learn out from the 24 birds that even a bird that has three signs is kosher, is prohibited until it has all four signs. Well, if that's the case, if you need all four signs, Orev, the Katsa Rahman Alamli, why would we talk about the Orev, which has only two of the signs? The other birds have three and you can't eat them. This like tray me by, so for sure we don't even need to list the raven that has only two of the signs. So the Gemara says, "V'leil of me orev." So why don't we learn from the orev that ma'asam trelo, just like the orev, any bird that has two non-kosher signs is not kosher. I've called trelo, any bird that has two signs is not kosher. The Gemara says, "When came Paras Valaznia, the Kasar Rahman Alamli." By the way, the Gemara doesn't tell us which of the signs the orev has, which make it non-kosher. So we'd have to. This is where it gets tricky. You have to compare it to what we identify and see if they have those signs. I was driving all night, so I didn't get a chance to look up to see what the raven has in terms of how many of these signs match what we know about the raven. But the Gemara then asked the question, what we call the raven. The Gemara then asked the question, Paras why does the Torah write about the Paras? I think it's usually translated as the osprey and the Ozniyah. Another bird, I forget which bird it is exactly. So the Paras and the Ozniyah that the Torah writes about, why is that listed? That has only one sign. If it has, how do they translate the Ozniyah? And what's the Paras then? Okay, fine. So the Paras is according to the art scroll, the Paras is not translated. The Ozniyah is the osprey. So if there's two birds that we don't eat, so if that's the case, the one that has only one sign, for sure it's not kosher. So the Gemara says, "V'nigmar mi yes." Okay.
Translates into English as osafrash.
The osafrash. Okay. Thank you. V'nigmar mi paras ve'oznias. Why don't we learn out from the paras and the ozniah that they have only one sign and they're prohibited to eat? So also any bird that has only one sign that's not kosher should be prohibited. It has to have at least two. It should need at least two kosher signs. The Gemara says, "Imkei nesher the katsav rachman alamli." Well, if that's the case, why does Torah have to list the nesher, which has zero signs? And the way it's like call me by, if even one sign you can't eat it, the ones that have zero signs for sure you can. So the Gemara says, so we see from here the nesher that has no signs, you can't eat it. But if it has one sign, you should be able to eat it. And that explains the position of Rebbe Chia, that a bird that comes with one sign is allowed to be eaten, except for those that are listed explicitly in the Torah as being non-kosher. So if that's the case, al-taima, mean to say that that without the Nasher, I would being listed, I would have said that as a bird, that a bird that has one siman will be prohibited. El time of the of Rahman Nasher. So the reason that we don't learn that from the Paris and the Ozniyah is because the Torah talked about the Nasher as being non-kosher. But that were not the case. If I were to say we should learn out a bird that comes with one siman from the Paris and the Ozniyah, we have a different problem. Paris and the Ozniyah, which have one sign, we would say everything that has one sign is not kosher. But if that's the case, the Paris and the Ozniyah are two psukim that both come to tell us the same thing. And we have a general rule throughout the Shas that Shnei Ksuvim and Bank Echad a Melandin, that if there are two verses that say the same thing, we don't learn out from it because the fact that there are two verses that tell us something, that's the exception. So if that's the case, we should have said from that only those two birds that have one siman are not kosher, but all the other birds that have one siman of kashrus are kosher. So Gemara says, no, Gemiri, we have a tradition, dikabai, like kabai, dikabai, like kabai. They each have different signs. They each have different simanim of what makes them kosher. They each have different signs of what makes them non-kosher. And so therefore, that's why we need both psukim to list it. So the Gemara says, that doesn't make sense. We still have two psukim that teach us the same thing. Since there are 24 non-kosher birds, and most of them have three signs of being kosher, and since the Paris and the Ozniyah, they each have one different siman, and the kosher siman that's found by the Paris is not the siman that's found by the Ozniyah, but that's the case. It's not possible that one of the signs that's by the Paris or the Ozniyah is found by the other non-kosher birds. And so too, and so if that's the case, we would have two verses that are coming at the same time. And so therefore, we could say that even if the Nasher was not listed, we would not have been able to learn out from the Paris and the Ozniyah. So Gemara says, no, Gemiri, Esrim Arba Ofos Tmeim V'arba Simanim. Tlasa Adari Bekulu. So we have a tradition that there are 24 non-kosher birds, and 4 of the simanim are found amongst all of them. Tlasa Hadra Bekulu. 3 of them are found. 3 of these kosher signs are found in all of them. As from Shlosha, so 20 of these birds, each one of them have 3 of these simanim. Utrei ba'orev, the orev has 2 signs of being kosher, and chad b'paris and chad b'ozniyah, and the isabah le'isabah. So to summarize, we have 24 non-kosher birds. They 20 of them have, and 3 of them are found in all of the birds of these non-kosher. 3 of them have kosher signs in 20 of them, and the Orav has 2 kosher signs, and the Paris and the Ozniyah have 1 kosher sign, and the one that's by the Paris is not by the Ozniyah, and vice versa. And so therefore we have one bird that has, so basically the Paris and the Ozniyah, each one of them has a different one of the 4th sign. So therefore we say that all of the, that none of the other birds have, which would make them kosher. And so since that bird, we don't have any birds that match up that they're independent. You might have thought that any bird that has this 4th kosher sign, which the Paris or the Ozniyah have, we could learn out from it and prohibit it, and for sure, we should prohibit the Nesher, that it doesn't have any signs. Kasav Rahman Nesher, so therefore the Torah has to write about the Nesher. And so that Nasher, the late slate call, who do otechol? So to say the Nasher that has none of the signs, that we can't eat. But if there's one that has one kosher sign, you could eat it. So now the Gemara says, so if we say from here that we went out from the Nasher that only a bird that doesn't have any kosher signs, you can't eat it. So the Torin that has, meaning say if we learn out from a Nasher that only a bird that has none of the kosher signs can you not eat. Well, if that's the case, why does the Torah need to write about a Torah, about a dove, which has all four kosher signs? Why do we need to write that? Because we don't learn if it even has one kosher sign, it's allowed. Then for sure, if it has four kosher signs, it should be allowed. So Amarav Ukfa Barchama. Then when the Torah tells us about the Torah, that's the carbon. It means to say that only the Torah and the Bnei Yonah are kosher for a carbon. But really, we're not learning out from the Torah and the Bnei Yonah which birds are kosher to eat. So Tosfos says that the Gemara is recanting what it initially thought, that only those animals that are similar to the Torah are kosher to eat. And the Gemara is telling us, no, there's no pasuk. And every time the Torah writes, the Torah are kosher, it's only to teach us about the Mizbeach. And it's only to teach us that it's kosher for the carbon. And you need all four signs. But according to the Gemara, really you only need one kosher sign. Let me just show you what the Aliba de Hilchasa says here at the back of the Gemara. In the back of the Gemara, we'll see about the Ophos, Aliba de Hilchasa. The Gemara says here, Ophos hataharim v'atmeim. So we'll look at what they say here. It says, Simane of tahar lo nisparshu min Torah. The signs of a kosher bird are not explicit in the Torah. The Torah just listed the non-kosher birds, and all other birds that are not mentioned in Torah are permitted. And then we have the 24 that are listed in the Torah, which are not kosher. But, and now is the big but, meaning to say, really, technically speaking, every bird is kosher. But the Rambam writes, and the Shulchan Aruch writes, whoever is an expert in those birds and in their names, he can eat every bird. That's not one of those 24, and it doesn't need a bedika. But we need a tradition to eat it. And that's where the matter is spread out, and everybody knows in that place that it's kosher. And so therefore, you can only eat a bird today if you know that it's kosher. Now we have a question, whether there's a lot of questions here, because this goes to the fundamental issue of whether or not we can make a new tradition. And that's the whole question about turkey, but also we have a question about whether or not you have a kosher bird that can flip to being non-kosher. So from example, let me just read a little bit from this. In our sugya, it's clear that we learn from the Nasher and the Torah, the Simone Tuma and the Tara of the birds. The Nasher has all four signs of it's not kosher, and the Torah has all four signs of what's kosher. And that's the general rule, that any bird that caws is not kosher. And the Chazam Sofer brought down in the name of the Yereim that in a bird that has three of the signs of kosher, and you discover that it caws, that's obviously not kosher. But and so therefore, if that's the case, so it says the Chasam Sofer, there's three signs of being kosher and then a cause, that means it's really a derivative of the Nasher. It just changed. It changed after it's created, and that's why it doesn't have the other signs. Clawing is one of the signs of non-kosher. And then it caused, Chasam Sofer says that's an indication that it really was the Nasher, and it just changed some of its signs, like evolution, I guess. And so it's not kosher. He writes, but it's only if you don't know if it caused, and then if you have the other three signs, then we could say it's, then we can assume it doesn't cause. That then the Chasam Sofer brings down in the name of the Uraim. Uraim was Rebbe Lezer of Metz, writing in the Rhineland. Metz is in northern France, I think it's right along the Rhineland region. That he lived in, he died in the 13th century. He was a student, one of the Baalei Tosafos, but the Germanic influence. The Chasam Sofer writes that it's halacha Moshe Sinai that if you find nowadays a kosher bird that claws, now we're going to assume it's not kosher anymore, because it says even though when it was born it was kosher, but now that we know that it claws, we'll assume that it changed. So the tradition changed. So it's possible that the species changed, they evolved, and it became like you could breed. I guess you could breed an animal to claw. So if you have chickens that start clawing like that, then they're going to become not kosher. So wow. If it claws, but it has these three signs of being kosher, the Chasam Sofer saying, quoting the Uraim, it's not kosher because it's indication that it changed from its original state. It's one of them. Well, no, it's one of the paradigms, but not everybody agrees with this. Then we talk about the extra finger. Because the question is, he quotes here, the Shut Beis Hasharim quotes the Ramban lived 13th century in Spanish lands, that the drisa is not a sign. It's not. He says that this clawing, that the drisa is not a sign of being non-kosher. It's just it comes out from it that the Torah doesn't want us to be near such a cruel animal. The Ramban writes, therefore, if it claws, that is also what makes it non-kosher. The Ramban says that the clawing indicates it's a harsh bird, a cruel bird, and so therefore we don't want it to be kosher. But the Shevet Alevi is now we're in the modern period. Writes he doesn't accept all this. He doesn't accept all this. Anyway, he says if it has the three kosher signs and we don't know if it claws, we could assume it's kosher. Anyway. And then he has another question here, which is a lot of, obviously, you can see they go a lot with all of this. I mean, there's a whole discussion of Turkey. I don't want to go into that now because we discussed it. But what about a bird, a fish that was created? They make a new species, and this is called a fish that they called carpion. And so typically speaking, the carp are bred with scales. So carp is kosher. But nowadays, we have a new way of making the carp that you can make it without scales. Oh, I didn't even know about that. I wonder if, this is written, let's say, 10 years ago. So can you eat that? Can you eat a carp that's bred to not have scales? You can imagine that, because it's annoying, the scales, right? You don't have to scale it out. So can you eat a carp that you make without scales? So do we say this is a new carp and therefore a new creature and you can't eat it? Or do we say the Torah allows the scales? The Torah allows the carp, which has scales. And so therefore, don't consider this a new fish. It's just this fish doesn't have the scales on it now, but it's really a kosher fish. So the Shut Levi says, he wants to be that since maybe at first glance the Shevet Alevi, Rav Rosner quotes, maybe we have to be strict like Chazam Sofer, that a new fish was created here, and so therefore it's not kosher. But he pushes this off. He says not the same thing, because really it's the humans who are getting rid of these scales. So it has the scales. It's just we got rid of them. So anyway, he writes, Lamaisa, he's strict, and he says, we don't allow it, because if you're going to eat these fish without the scales, then you might eat non-kosher fish without the scales. Uh, uh, Lamaisa, we're strict about these fish according to the postgame they bring here, but I haven't researched it. All right, let's stop here, bro. What are they? What are they